Hey everyone, it's Erin. Sorry I sound like a frog or a middle school boy or a middle school boy frog this week. I am currently getting over a really bad cold. The same cold I get every beginning of every October, like clockwork. By the way, my book finally came in at the library. It's The Hollow by Jessica Verde, and I'm really liking it so far. I'm only a little ways into it. It means that, but I'm really liking it so far, and I'm glad I finally came in because it's been a long wait. So to recap, if you'll remember last week, we were talking about our beginnings of writing and how we got started with writing and what we wrote when we were kids. So this week we're continuing with that. Except for instead of talking about what we wrote when we were kids, we're talking about what we write now. So we're kind of skipping all the years in between and just jumping ahead. It took me a really long time to figure out what exactly I like to write and what I could write that would hold my attention and also expand into a novel length story, because I don't know, the way my brain works, I always kind of think in longer term, and so writing short stories has always been a lot harder for me than writing novel length stories. I don't know why. It's just kind of the way my brain functions, I guess. I found out that I wasn't very good at writing comedic things. While I have enough comedy fodder in my life just with my group of friends, oh, you should hear conversations we have. It's really weird comedy and enough to add comedic relief to the story, but not enough to draw out an entire story. Or maybe I'm just not quite that quirky. I don't know. I've never been very successful with writing strictly comedic stories. Historical fiction is also kind of a fail for me because I've never really been big in history class. Never really did very well in history class, and there was only a handful of events and time periods that I find interesting enough to even remotely research, and even then my tolerance of researching them isn't very much, with the exception of perhaps Titanic. But even then, like, eventually you read all the facts and then you're just rereading the same facts over and over again. It could also be a confidence issue that I'm nervous that I'll, not do the time period or the event justice or something. I don't know. And the other thing that's been epic fail for me has been fantasy. I've tried writing fantasy a few times, and that has always ended in completely epic fail. Yeah, I don't know why. I guess maybe my brain doesn't work that way, or I don't have a vivid enough imagination, or maybe it involves too much thought and planning and it overwhelms me. I don't know what it is. I love reading fantasy, but God knows I've never been very successful in writing it. That I love writing things where I get to make up the rules, essentially, and I love really dramatic things, and it took me until like college to realize that it was okay to write stuff like that, even though I think I disturbed my parents from time to time. My first novel, for example, I got to, it was definitely a make up my own rules kind of thing, because I was writing about a cult. So the whole novel is set in, the real world. It's set in the world that all of us recognize, yeah, but within the cult, I had to create the whole cult culture, which meant I got to make up the rules, so the rules were different. I'm currently working on like a dystopian story, which is another thing that I really like writing, and it's set like 15 years in the future, and the world is very recognizable as our, our culture, our communities, but the rules are completely different. So while it's recognizable, it's also just a little bit different. Fellow Road Town writer Emily and I are trying to do a collaborative project. By the way, Emily, I need your second chapter. that's kind of fun because it's more of a paranormal thing, and so it's set in the real world, and actually my portion of it is actually more of a historical fiction bit, so it's kind of fun because it's paranormal and the rules are different. I don't really have the fear of not doing it justice. The other thing that I really like writing when I'm writing more just like strictly realistic things, I love writing things, I'm big on like really dramatic things, difficult issues, controversial topics. It's fun. I don't know, I like that kind of stuff. What I'm actually going to do now is share a little tidbit of my current project, so you can see a bit of a comparison between what I wrote when I was, first starting to write and what I write now, and it's very different. I actually broke 50,000 words this past week, so there was much dancing and celebration in my head. So I'm going to share just a little bit. It's from towards the beginning of the manuscript, and it really hasn't been edited yet. So I apologize in advance if it sounds stupid or doesn't make much sense, because I'm still working on the first draft. Another series of yells floated up the stairs. I practically run into the grade 11 classroom down the hall and make my grand entrance by slamming my shoulder into the doorframe. Graceful, Chandler smirks as I slide into my desk. I set my bag near my feet, calmly pull out my notebook, rip out a scrap of paper, crumple it into a ball, and chuck it at Chandler's ear. Amber, sitting in front of me, laughs. You shouldn't waste paper, you know. It's a valuable resource, Chandler says. Amber turns around in her desk and we exchange a look. Everything's a valuable resource, in case you haven't noticed, I retort. It's just now, seeing as how Chandler has finally shut his trap, that I realize the ominous buzzing in the room. Not like bees or wasps or flies, although we have our fair share of those too. The people are buzzing. Those who, like me, came into the classroom within the last few minutes are frantically mumbling to their friends who arrived here earlier. I know what they're probably talking about, but Amber doesn't. She looks around, confused, and then leans toward me to whisper, "What's going on?" I lean closer to her, and Chandler puts his head near ours too. For all his complaining, for all his pretending to be tough, he really just wants to know as much as everyone else. There was an explosion, I say. That has to be what it was. All you could see was the smoke. It looked like it was a few miles away, but the GP were freaked out, and then I heard yelling when I was taking the minis to their classes. The minis is our nickname for our younger siblings, all four of us. When our families all ended up in the same apartment building nearly 10 years ago, and all of us kids formed our own little extended family, the four of us older ones were expected to keep an eye on the younger ones. In order to make things easier for general conversation, instead of referring to the little siblings by name, we started calling them the minis. It never went away, even though none of them are very small anymore. "What's today's date?" Amber snaps. Her voice is harsher than usual, forcing her accent out thicker. The sudden change in tone makes Chandler and me jump a little. We bump foreheads. "God, Amber," Chandler groans, rubbing his forehead with his fist. "Tourette's much?" Chandler shoots him a rare death glare as she pulls her bag into her lap. She starts digging through it, clearly on the hunt for something. "I'm serious, you jerk. What's the date?" "I don't know. I lost track." I raise my eyebrows. "How do you lose track of the date?" Chandler drops his hand from his forehead and smirks at me. "Fine then, Care. What's today's date?" I open my mouth and then close it again. Crap. I lost track. Before Chandler can do something annoying like yelling, "Ha!" in the middle of the classroom, I add, "But in my defense, Connor threw a pair of shoes at me last night." So thanks for putting up with my froggy voice, and hopefully I'll sound better next week. And so enjoy the rest of the videos this week, and I'm going to go get ready for dance class now. I will see you guys next week, and don't get sick. It's no fun. See ya. Dystopian. I'm getting really into writing paranormal things. The phone is ringing. Ringing phone. That was poor timing.